What's up, y'all? Cliche Dude Stuff finally back at you with another video. How is everyone doing today? So real quick before we get into it, for those of you that don't know, I bought a house, so I've been in the process of moving, and it's taking a lot longer than I thought it would to get settled, particularly with getting my internet established. I'm having to have a tech come look at it to figure out what the heck is going on, and I just don't know how long it's going to take before I'm up and running and am able to get back to posting my regular uploads, particularly my RuneScape content. So I did want to give y'all a heads up about that. But with that out of the way, on to the video. Again, real quick, for those of you that don't know, in the beginning of the year, I set a personal goal for myself to watch at least one movie every day for the entire year, with the ultimate goal being to watch 420 movies by the end of the year, strictly for meme purposes. And at the end of the month, I will do a quick summary of the movies that I watched. This is really for me to kind of keep track of my thoughts of the movies, but I figured I'd post them to YouTube as well, and maybe some people would enjoy it. And I feel like this video might be a little bit more negative than I'm used to being, just with everything that's like been going on with the move. I'm kind of in like a funky mindset, but I'll still try to keep it positive. But if I come off as negative, that might be partially why. So I wanted to mention that. Anyway, first movie that I watched of May 2023 was Kids vs. Aliens. For those of you that watched my last video, you'll recall that I watched the VHS horror anthology series, and some of the shorts got turned into actual full-length movies. Last time we watched a movie called Siren, which is based off of one of the shorts, obviously from VHS. And in May, we watched a movie called Kids vs. Aliens, which obviously is based off another short. With Kids vs. Aliens, I didn't care for the original short, and honestly, I didn't care for the movie. I'm really not sure who it was made for, because it's got like, it's rated R or rated MA. It's got like gore, a lot of profanity, things like that. But then it's like Nickelodeon style acting and bullies and stuff like that. So it's kind of aimed towards kids, but I'm not sure if it got a theatrical release. I should have looked into it. But even if it had a theatrical release, it wouldn't have made its budget back, because the people that were targeted couldn't have watched the movie anyway. And I know kids still watch rated R movies, but anyway, I digress. The one saving grace for me on a personal level was that the movie did kind of feature some levels of professional wrestling, which I'm a huge fan of. Like, the kids had a wrestling ring in their like garage or whatever it was. So that part I enjoyed. But other than that, and I guess the other saving grace is the movie isn't long at all. It's like barely over an hour. So if you decide to watch it, even if you don't like it, you're not wasting that much time. Moving on to another movie, I don't have a lot of great things to say, but Don't Look Up from, I think it came out in 2022, if I'm not mistaken. But starring Leonardo DiCaprio, Jennifer Lawrence, and to my surprise, Timothée Chalamet makes an appearance, which was my favorite part of the movie. But the rest of the movie I didn't really care for. Obviously, it had a message that it was not subtle about at all. It was very on the nose about, and which in and of itself isn't like bad. Movies can have a message, but I feel like your message shouldn't hinder your movie. And for Don't Look Up, I think it did that, at least for me. Generally, I watch movies to escape all the bullcrap of our normal day-to-day life. So watching a movie that is strictly just reminding me how crappy like life is, and obviously like it's not bad that it's trying to like start a conversation, start a dialogue about certain stuff, but I don't think it did it in the best way. So yeah, I don't feel like I missed out for not having watched it up until now. But moving on to a positive review, I guess, for lack of a better term, I finally got around to watching Nightcrawler starring Jake Gyllenhaal. I went on a mini Jake Gyllenhaal binge, and I never got around to watching this movie when it first came out, strictly because I have this bad habit of avoiding movies if I don't think I'll really care about the subject matter. And just seeing like just one trailer of Nightcrawler, I'm like, just, it's a reporter trying to do his job in like a dangerous city is what my initial thought was. I'm like, I don't care about that. But I was stupid. Nightcrawler is a phenomenal movie. Perhaps Jake Gyllenhaal's best performance that even up till now, his acting was awesome. The way he was able to portray the uneasiness of his character, very off-putting, but in the best way. Not like that you would want to interact with this guy in real life, but it was a joy to watch. A lot of the scenes were so tense. Just great acting all the way around. I can't say enough about this movie, and I'll recommend it to anybody, even like what I would consider like a casual movie fan. I feel like would still enjoy this because it is kind of, I guess some people would see it as a slow burn, but there's enough action to keep you invested, and just the way the characters interact and everything. To me, it's an exciting movie, and again, I recommend it to anybody. Now, moving on to another Jake Gyllenhaal movie, which I don't have as many positive things to say, but Velvet Buzzsaw, I believe it's a Netflix exclusive, starring Jake Gyllenhaal and several people whose names I forget. And again, I don't take notes. The only thing I have in front of me is my list of movies, because I definitely wouldn't remember that. But I know it's got Jake Gyllenhaal, and John Malkovich is in it, but he's barely in it, which kind of happens with him a lot. He just makes his little cameos and things like that. But I was sad that he wasn't in it more. But yeah, Velvet Buzzsaw, not the best movie. Again, I'm gonna try not to be too negative, but I was hoping for that we would at least have some good kills, but everything was pretty cheesy and didn't really stand out in a positive light. Now, again, going to the other side of the spectrum yet again with Prisoners, a fantastic movie starring Jake Gyllenhaal as well as Hugh Jackman, and what's probably Hugh Jackman's best performance, at least as like film is concerned. Prisoners is a fantastic movie. It's a movie I knew very little about. I knew I was going to get around to watching it eventually, so whenever a video would get recommended on YouTube about like an analysis of Prisoners, I would avoid it. I didn't want anything spoiled, and I'm glad that I did that because I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know the turns, the little twists that were going to happen, and I think that made the experience all the more better for me, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. Again, Hugh Jackman, probably the role of his career. Jake Gyllenhaal, fantastic. He plays the detective, and just the way he presents his character, especially with little mannerisms and stuff, is just phenomenal. And one of the actors is, again, I can't remember his name, but he plays the Riddler in the Batman starring Robert Pattinson. So, and it's kind of a similar, I don't know how to describe it, almost like a kooky type of portrayal of the character. Is very similar between the two movies. But yeah, Prisoners, if you haven't seen it, highly recommend it. Moving on to the first animated film that I watched of May, It's Such a Beautiful Day, which is actually, it sounds like it's a great lovey-dovey type of a movie, but it's depressing, existential dread type of movie. That's it. That was a little bit less accessible as something like Nightcrawler. I don't think a lot of mainstream moviegoers would appreciate it, but if you're an animated or an animation fan, especially if you're okay with animation that's not meant for kids, and you're okay with artists who experiment things like that. This one experimented in a particular minimalist type of way, but for me, it was a very beautiful movie. So yeah, It's Such a Beautiful Day. Definitely do check it out. As long as you can handle kind of depressing, again, existential dread type of things. You know, I don't want to depress y'all. I don't want to recommend a movie that's going to depress y'all, but it is a really good movie. And the next movie depressed me. Again, this seems like such a negative video, and I'm sorry, but 50 Shades of Grey, I had never watched it on purpose. Had someone recommend it to me, and I told them I would watch it, and it's basically what I thought it was going to be. 50 Shades of Grey started off as fan fiction, and you can 100% tell it is just the cheesiest self-insert of the author, or the director, or whoever. it's literally just fan fiction in the worst way. I won't dwell on it. 50 Shades of Grey, it is what you think it is if you haven't seen it. Now, moving on to one of the best movies that I watched of the month and early of the year, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. As you can see, I'm wearing my Groot of Volume 2 shirt today. But yeah, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. If you haven't seen it, I won't spoil it. But a great, great movie. James Gunn writes the Guardians characters better than anyone, which makes sense. But the Guardians, the way they're written in the Guardians of the Galaxy movies versus how they're written in the Avengers movies is not necessarily night and day. They're not necessarily bad in the Avengers movies, but they are peak performance in the Guardians movies. Just James Gunn really knows his characters, and it's a shame to the MCU that he's leaving, but is a great, well, I'm assuming it's going to be a great get for DC. And I'm very excited to see what they'll be able to do over there. I will say, and I don't think this will be too much of a spoiler, but Guardians of the Galaxy is a very anti-corporate movie. And it seemed like it was James Gunn throwing a middle finger to Disney on his way out the door. And I don't know if that was lost upon people who approved the movie or if they just didn't care because they knew it was going to be a smash hit. But yeah, Guardians of the Galaxy 3. I won't gush over it too much. I don't want to make this movie or this video too long. But yeah, watch it if you haven't. Even if you're not a fan of most Marvel movies, I think the Guardians movies are in a league of their own. Moving back to another Jake Gyllenhaal movie, this is one where he doesn't necessarily play like the main, like he's not the main lead or even the second lead. It's called The Brothers Sisters. I had never even heard of this movie. It is a Western starring Joaquin Phoenix and John C. Reilly, and then of course Jake Gyllenhaal, and also, and I'm mad that I cannot remember the actor's name, but one of the actors from Nightcrawler who plays Jake Gyllenhaal's intern in Nightcrawler also plays in this movie, which I was so hyped for to see them be able to interact again. But yeah, The Brothers Sisters, now I love all the actors, so I may be a little biased, but I loved the movie. Plot-wise, there's not a whole lot that goes on. I mean, it's a Western. Generally, Westerns are pretty straightforward, and this one's no different. But yeah, I mean, it's just a great, I don't know, again, I don't know if it's a great movie. I loved it. Maybe it's because I loved all the actors, but I'm glad I watched it. And one reason I love that I'm doing this year, I would have never watched this movie if I didn't like go out of my way to look for, all the movies that Jake Gyllenhaal's in. And that's how I found this one, and I'm glad I did. Now moving on to one of them that I've known about forever, Brokeback Mountain, starring, of course, Jake Gyllenhaal and Heath Ledger. So just a very quick backstory on me. I grew up very conservative, very Christian, very sheltered. Something like Brokeback Mountain, is hell worthy, more or less, and the way I grew up. But even after breaking away from that, being an adult, I'm almost 30 now, I just never circled back to watching it. And again, not because I've already broken out of that mold, more or less, but so it's not that I didn't return to it out of any type of hate or bigotry. Honestly, it just kind of faded out of my mind. Of course, there's still you think about jokes and stuff that Family Guy makes and things like that, but as far as considering watching it as an actual film, I hadn't really thought about it until, this month. And, I was reminded that Brokeback Mountain is a Jake Gyllenhaal movie. And I was like, yeah, let me watch that. And let me say, I was not prepared for this movie to be as sad as it was. And the amount of hate and backlash that it got whenever it came out, or at least that I'm aware that it got, I was a real young kid when it came out. I was 10 or whatever it was, or whatever I was. But from what I understand, it got an ungodly amount of hate, and definitely not deserved. It is a beautiful movie, and the love scenes aren't even that rampant, and whenever they happen, it's very tame. So the fact that people can't appreciate the movie because of their own personal like feelings is sad to me. But I highly recommend Brokeback Mountain. It is a movie I would definitely revisit, probably multiple times. I'll just have to make sure I'm in the right headset for it because it is heavy. It is a sad movie. And side note, Anne Hathaway's in it. I had no idea. So whenever she came on screen, I was like, oh, okay. But yeah, it is a real enjoyable movie. Just bring your. I was gonna say, never mind. Moving on to a movie that made me sad for a different reason. So when I do these, like, whenever I'm watching these movies, whenever I'm planning out what movies I'm gonna watch, I try to avoid, trailers, posters, any online talk, especially if it's a newer movie. The movie Paint, starring Owen Wilson, I just saw a poster in a movie theater, and I was like, I'm gonna watch that movie. And I, it's not a great movie. It's Owen Wilson. What I thought he was doing was portraying Bob Ross. He was not. He was portraying a parody of Bob Ross. And just watching the movie, it seems like the director or whoever wrote the movie just had an axe to grind against Bob Ross. And maybe that wasn't their intention. Maybe they just did the parody just for Owen Wilson's just like looks and stuff. But even like the way he acts, and then there's like, I don't know. It was upsetting for me to watch this movie again, especially since I wasn't aware of what I was getting into. I did look into it a little bit afterwards, and apparently Bob Ross did have some controversies, and I don't know if this movie was trying to bring those to light and just did it in not the best way, but yeah, I was disappointed by this movie, and I need to manage my expectations better, I guess. But moving on to a movie called Game Night, which I watched because I recently watched Dungeons and Dragons Honor Among Thieves, and Game Night is made by the same people. And it is a real fun time. I kind of put it in the same vein as the movie Tag, starring Jeremy Renner. It's just a fun movie, funner, more fun than it had any right to be or what I expected it to be. And I'm gonna kind of move on kind of fast because this video is already getting kind of longer than it needs to be where am in my list. But I watched the 3 Cloverfield movies. I had seen the first one previously, but I hadn't seen the other 2. Of course, the first Cloverfield movie, almost an instant classic, found footage style film made for basically a shoestring budget. But what they were able to do with that budget was really phenomenal. And then 10 Cloverfield Lane came out, and it was just a different style altogether, just kind of like a straightforward type of movie. It wasn't found footage this time. Starring John Goodman, whereas I don't think the first Cloverfield movie really had any big name actors from what I can remember. But yeah, 10 Cloverfield Lane, most of the movie, like there's no connection to the first one. And then like the end happens, and I've heard some people have a problem with the way it connected to the first movie, that it, it kind of like jumps the shark a little bit. But I loved it. John Goodman plays his role very well, very tense movie, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. Cloverfield Paradox, which is the third one, they really should have stopped it too. From what I understand, the Cloverfield Paradox wasn't originally meant to be part of the Cloverfield universe. They just made a sci-fi movie and then decided to slap the Cloverfield brand on it and then just added some additional scenes to kind of link them together. And I totally buy into that because it feels very disjointed from the rest of the franchise. And I thought they were going to come out with a 4th one, but as of this video, they have not. So I don't know if Cloverfield Paradox kind of killed that goal. But yeah, definitely watch the first 2, though, if you're interested in those movies. Then moving on to kind of a good children's style family movie, Straight Outta Nowhere, which is Scooby-Doo meeting Courage the Cowardly Dog. It's just a cute little kids movie, which I enjoyed. I'm a huge fan of both IPs. Love Scooby Doo, love Courage. There were some callbacks. Some characters were brought back. LeQuack and Cats, I believe, from the early seasons of Courage the Cowardly Dog, and it was just a fun time. So a good, just good to throw it on, turn your brain off, and just chill with your dogs and watch a movie. I'm glad it exists. At this point in the month, I decided to watch most of the Alien movies. I watched all of them but Prometheus because I had recently seen it and I didn't feel like watching it again. But I'll just do a quick rundown of these movies. And I did watch the extended versions of all the movies, which is the first time I've done that. And it didn't change my opinions for most of them. Alien, the original Alien, of course, very good, instant classic. And Aliens, another instant classic, and it kind of goes back and forth between which one is considered the better movie. I enjoyed the first one more just because of the more suspenseful aspect of it, whereas Aliens is more of an action movie, which is fine. That's totally well and good. It's still a phenomenal movie. I enjoy Alien the most, but with Aliens, since this is my first time watching the extended version, whether it was the director's cut, extended cut, like all of them have different names for what their extended version is. But, obviously there's scenes that were taken out of the theatrical cut. One of them that was taken out of Aliens, and it's a shame that it was taken out, was so Ripley goes into like cryo sleep, right? For like 50, 60 something years, whatever it was. When she was on her way back home, she was trying to make it back home to see her 11-year-old daughter. Whenever she gets out of the cryo sleep, she realizes her daughter has passed, and when she passed, she was in her 80s, and is very heartbroken. And from that scene wasn't in the theatrical cut, and whenever I watched it, I like froze. I'm like, wait, I don't remember that being in the movie, and it really adds a lot more weight to Ripley and Newt's relationship, and I don't understand why they cut it. I don't know if it was strictly for time or there was a plot reason that I don't know. But moving on to Alien 3, before I get lost in my own thoughts here, the extended cut of this one is the one that changes the movie the most, in my opinion. So for those of you that don't know, David Fincher, this was his first theatrical, or it was his film debut is what I'm trying to say, if I can find my words. Up until that point, if I'm not mistaken, he had only directed music videos. Alien 3 was his film debut, and he disowns it because of all the studio interference. But I think watching the extended cut may change some people's minds on the hate that it gets. Because I watched it and I didn't hate it. I mean, of course, it is definitely a step down from the first two movies, but it's an enjoyable movie. A lot of the scenes of the rest of the crew, it was taken out of the theatrical cut. So in the extended version, you get a lot more scenes with characters that aren't Ripley, which I love Ripley, but it kind of builds the world better. And I don't know, I enjoyed it this go around. And it's also funny to me, just a quick little side tangent. But so Alien 3 is kind of crapped on, but one of the most iconic scenes of the xenomorph just staring at Ripley, and then Ripley just kind of, basically panicking, but trying to keep her composure. And then the xenomorph just kind of like leaves her be because, spoiler alert, Ripley, was pregnant with a xenomorph, and the adult xenomorph knew that. But that's an iconic shot, and it's from one of the most hated Alien movies. So I just find that funny. Moving on to Alien Resurrection. The extended cut didn't really add much of anything to it that I can remember. As a matter of fact, I don't know if I noticed any differences, just going off memory. In Alien Resurrection, Ripley is brought back because, spoiler alert, she dies in Alien 3. Alien Resurrection, she gets brought back as a clone, and she's basically like a Terminator type of android, super strength or whatever else. And it just didn't feel like an Alien movie to me. To me, that's the worst of the original Alien movies, or it's the one that I enjoy the least. Like, I can go back and I'll watch the original 3, like back to back to back, no problem, no questions asked, but I wouldn't revisit the 4th one unless I was doing like a entire series binge, like I did in May. And then again, I skipped over Prometheus, and I finally got around to watching Alien Covenant, which has callbacks to Prometheus. Like David comes back, Michael Fassbender's character, but it kind of jumps the story. Like at the end of Prometheus, I can't remember characters' names. Again, I don't really have notes, so forgive me. But it kind of leads you expecting something to happen, and then you get to Alien Covenant, and it's like we've already skipped over that. The story's already skipped over that, and now we're on to something else. And I didn't really love Prometheus, but I'm kind of sad that it did that. And I'm assuming it did that because there was kind of backlash from Alien fans, so they were trying to cater to the Alien fan base, and focus more on like xenomorphs and things like that. But I don't really think it works for the movie. Even though I'm not a huge Prometheus fan, I felt like they should have just stuck to their guns and kept going with what they were going with. And this is all speculation on my part. I didn't really do any research in this. This is just me watching the movies, and what I'm guessing is what happened. But yeah, I mean, Alien Covenant, it's a beautifully shot film, which you'll hear people say, but it's not one that I feel like I'll ever have to watch again. But anyway, now moving on, I watched the original Frankenstein from 1931, and it is a classic for a reason. I think it's a movie that holds up incredibly well, and it's one of them that I think a modern audience can enjoy as well, even though it's in black and white. Like, I feel like I could sit down with a non-mainstream moviegoer and throw on Frankenstein, and then if they don't love it, they would at least be able to watch it and, just kind of like chat about it and things like that. But yeah, I think it holds up as a classic. Again, it's a classic for a reason. A modern classic, in my opinion, that I watched next, Lego Batman. If you've seen the movie, you know how great it is. You may have heard YouTubers talking about how great it is. Phenomenal movie. I originally saw it before watching BoJack Horseman, and this time I watched it after recently finishing BoJack Horseman for the second time, and I can't not hear BoJack whenever Batman talks because, Will Arnett, the same voice actor. But that aside, really funny movie. It does Batman justice, in my opinion. It does his relationship with Joker perfect, in my opinion. An underrated moment in the movie, whenever Batman's heating up something and he tries to put it on for like 2 minutes, but he accidentally does 20 minutes, and then he calls himself stupid under his breath. It just made me laugh because it's such a relatable moment. But yeah, Lego Batman, really great movie, really great animated movie. Another great animated movie, the movie 9, which I had started previously, but I never finished for whatever reason, whether it was because the person I was watching it with didn't want to finish it, or maybe I got preoccupied. But I love this movie. I can see how if I was a kid watching it, it may have kind of scared me a little bit. But I think it's a great children's movie, animated movie. It's about these, without spoiling it, it's about these basically doll-like things in a post-apocalyptic world that come to life and are trying to survive and, against, like, there's like a war going on with machines, very apocalyptic, kind of Terminator-esque. But yeah, it's a really great movie. One of the shots towards the end of the movie, they play, what was it, Somewhere Over the Rainbow, I believe. And then it's like it's a good feel-good moment, but then something happens, and I just thoroughly enjoy that movie, and I'm glad that I finally finished it. Now a movie I didn't enjoy, and again, sorry to make this so negative, but I was recommended a movie that was sold to me as a Spanish version of Mandy. And I think I was just being pranked because this was not a Spanish version of Mandy. It was called We Are the Flesh. Don't watch it. I guess I was told that because of some of the, art style could be seen as similar. Some of, the coloring and stuff like that. But story-wise, no. It is very disturbing, very off-putting for all the worst ways. A lot of taboo subjects that are covered. And not taboo in a way that, I don't know, I don't want to get too much into detail. Don't watch it is my recommendation. Of course, if you're an adult, do what you want to do. If you're not an adult, I mean, you shouldn't be watching it anyway. But yeah, moving on. Murder Mystery starring Adam Sandler and Jennifer Aniston. I'm gonna get a lot of hate for this, but I am not a huge Jennifer Aniston fan, and I respect Adam Sandler, but I don't love his movies. Having said that, I enjoyed most of Murder Mystery. The only part I really didn't care for was the opening, like setup, the first like 20 minutes or so when they're establishing like the relationships and just kind of like stuff that they have to do. But once like the plot actually got underway, I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was very funny. One of my favorite scenes, there's an ongoing gag with Adam Sandler's character because he's like a cop supposed to be a detective, and but he can't shoot worth a flip. Well, one of the bad guys has Jennifer Aniston who plays his wife, and she's like, don't like, so she's being held hostage. She doesn't want him to shoot because she doesn't want to get shot because his aim's so bad. Well, he shoots the bad guy in the arm, and they're like, whoa, like you learned how to shoot. And Adam Sandler goes, well, I was aiming for their leg. And it's so simple, but it was so funny. Just his delivery and everything was just top notch. But yeah, Murder Mystery, I actually enjoyed it. I was not expecting to. Now a couple movies that I've seen too many times, but I wanted something funny to watch. The Ted movies. Seth MacFarlane. I am a child, so I love Seth MacFarlane. I love Family Guy. I love American Dad, and I love the Ted movies. Mark Wahlberg, of course, he basically plays Mark Wahlberg and everything, but I think it works for Ted. Ted 2 specifically is one of my favorite, I don't want to say guilty pleasures, because I'm not ashamed that I like it. I'm not going to say it deserves like Oscar nominations or anything like that, but it's an enjoyable movie. One of the most relatable parts in Ted 2 is whenever Ted's hiding and someone starts singing Sweet Caroline, and then he pops out and goes, bum, bum, bum. Because that would be me. That's how, if I'm ever hiding and you're chasing me, just start singing Sweet Caroline, and that's going to happen. You're going to win. But yeah, the Ted movies, they're funny. They're what you expect from Seth MacFarlane, and I'm not ashamed of that. Moving on to a couple David Fincher films, Gone Girl and Social Network. David Fincher is just a phenomenal. I watched a lot of David Fincher movies, or at least 3 of them in May. That wasn't even the plan. I wasn't even doing a binge. But anyway, David Fincher, phenomenal. Really, really good at what he does. Gone Girl, great movie, great suspenseful movie. Leads you guessing for almost the entirety of its runtime. One complaint could be that it could have shaved like 20 minutes off the runtime to kind of wrap things up, but it did what it did for a reason. It wanted to kind of keep you on your toes on what decisions were going to be made. But yeah, Ben Affleck did a great job. Just his character kind of reminded me of his character in The Accountant, as far as just kind of like being like socially awkward and stuff. But yeah, Gone Girl, great movie. If you haven't seen it, definitely watch it. The Social Network, one of my favorite movies, and I believe it's Quentin Tarantino's, it's either his favorite movie or it's what he considers the best movie. Something like that. Like he praises it a lot, which I know not a lot of people care for Tarantino's opinion, but I thought that was worth mentioning. And I know not a lot of people like Jesse Eisenberg, but I don't know. I love him. Like the way he delivers his lines and stuff. It's kind of the same in every movie, but for me, it works. And I love The Social Network. I mean, it's basically just a dialogue movie. Like y'all know how I am with dialogue. I'm a sucker for good dialogue, and this movie has it in droves. And Andrew Garfield's in it, and I love Andrew Garfield. So for me, Social Network is a great movie if you haven't seen it. Moving on to Silent Hill. I only watched the first movie. I don't really care about the second one all that much, but I like revisiting the first one every now and then. And I think it is a very fun movie. Even if you aren't a video game fan, I think just the atmosphere, the scenery, the imagery, the characters, Pyramid Head. Of course, he's not in the original Silent Hill game. It's the second one. But it all works. I think it's very creative. Again, you don't have to be a Silent Hill game fan to enjoy the Silent Hill movie. Again, the only really complaint, I think it does drag a little past the halfway mark a little bit. But it's not like overly long. I think any horror fan would enjoy it. And then another horror movie, Drag Me to Hell, Sam Raimi movie, of course, the director of the original Evil Dead trilogy. And of course, Drag Me to Hell isn't as iconic, but it has, like you can tell, it's a Sam Raimi movie. It has a lot of the same quirks. It's goofy when it wants to be. It's got its practical effects for the most part. There is some CG that doesn't really age that well, but it is a fun movie. And there's one scene where a demon goes into a goat, and if you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. But then the goat starts talking, and it looks so ridiculous, but it's tongue-in-cheek. Like, Sam Raimi knows what he's doing. He doesn't take himself too seriously in these movies, and it's fun, and you can just watch it and enjoy it. And Justin Long's in this movie, and we all love Justin Long, so if you haven't seen Drag Me to Hell, I definitely do recommend it. Now a movie I was recommended again by a coworker, and I'll keep this one brief because Promising Young Woman. So again, recommended to me by a coworker. It's got Bo Burnham in it, so I'm like, cool, like it'll probably be a great movie. For this one, I think, and I've seen nothing but positive reviews about it, and I'm not saying it's a bad movie. I think most people get wrapped up in the subject matter and that it's trying to start a dialogue. And again, that can be great in and of itself, but I don't think that just because something has a good message that it's trying to present, basically I'm saying I don't like the movie for just like film reasons, not for message reasons. And I think it's okay to not like a movie even if it's got a good message that it's trying to present, even if it's trying to start a dialogue. I think I'm still allowed to not like it as a movie due to like things like character inconsistencies, plot contrivances. Again, I won't get into it too much because I don't want to be too negative. I think most people will enjoy the movie and like the movie. Schmidt's in it from New Girl. That caught me off guard, and I loved that. I'm definitely in the minority. But yeah, I personally didn't love it. And again, I'm a guy, so my opinion on it definitely doesn't even matter. So anyway, moving on. Hypnotic, starring again Ben Affleck. This one was directed by Robert Rodriguez, which was the selling point for me. I saw the trailer one time because it was playing when I went to the theaters. I forgot what movie I was watching when it played. But anyway, so I watched the trailer for that one, even though I'm trying to avoid trailers. But it looked interesting. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't have watched it. It takes a different turn than I expected it to. But I think it works. Not everybody agrees because the IMDb score last I checked was like 5.4. But I enjoyed it, and it's only like an hour and a half. So if it was like a 2.5 hour movie, I would have been exhausted and annoyed by it. It probably could have stood to be a little bit longer. But at an hour and a half, if you watch it, even if you don't like it, again, you haven't wasted that much time. And then the last movie I watched, just because I wanted to watch something I was familiar with and to watch something funny, I watched Life of Brian, the Monty Python movie, and it's a classic for a reason. A lot of good humor that, in my opinion, holds up really well. The biggest dickish joke. It's very immature, but I'm an immature person, so I laugh every time. So yeah, Life of Brian. If you're not familiar with Monty Python, Life of Brian, and then The Holy Grail, which is going to come up next video. Just really good, solid comedy movies. So that is the list of the movies that I watched in May 2023. Again, it was probably a little bit more negative due to circumstances. I'm kind of frustrated with things at the moment due to internet and things like that. So, but yeah, I hope y'all enjoyed. Tell me how I'm wrong about these movies in the comments if you so desire. I will not take offense. And I definitely hope y'all enjoyed as always, and hopefully I'll be back to my regular upload schedule, particularly with my RuneScape videos, hopefully sooner rather than later, fingers crossed. As always, if you have any requests, recommendations, suggestions, or questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments below. I hope everyone has a fantastic day, and I will see y'all later.